cycle across Manitoba started back off on the TCT, with some beautiful riding on the Crocus Trail. A goose family ran away when they saw me coming, but this one decided to lay down in the path instead. Don't worry, it was okay. Beautiful and quiet gravel roads carried me on into the evening and to the town of Roblin. Even with a nearly full moon, I was lucky enough to witness the magical spectacle of northern lights dancing in the sky. Carried on south through the Shell River Valley, an old glacial tributary of the Assiniboine River. In the town of Inglis, a row of wooden grain elevators has been restored and protected as a National Historic Site, the last elevator row in Canada. Riding past midnight under the light of a full moon was truly a serene experience. I actually found it safer than riding in the day, as the few cars that did come I could see coming from 10 minutes away. From the town of Dauphin, I climbed up on a beautiful evening into Riding Mountain National Park. The National Park parkways are always such peaceful riding and provide plenty of opportunities for wildlife sightings. A rainy morning brought me out of the park, down to Clear Lake and the town of Wasagaming. Riding south out of town, I was able to hop back on beautiful trail. It was soon back into endless farmland, where I enjoyed a long and peaceful ride on the Rossburn Rail Trail. Further onto the trail in the evening, the grasses on the side became longer and longer. This made it the perfect home for nuisance ticks. In just a few hours this day, I collected a total of 23 of these buggers. The land here seemed to stretch on forever. Endless mile-square patches of uniform crops. Still headed south, here I crossed the busy Trans-Canada Highway. Definitely the fastest route for cross-country cyclists, but not my cup of tea if I can avoid it. With glorious evening light overhead, I entered into Spruce Woods Provincial Park. This park has a really nice network of single-track bike paths adjacent to the road or further into the backcountry. A short hike is also possible to the Spirit Sands Dunes, while a few dunes are also visible from the road. After a night spent hiding in the tent from rain and lightning, I left the Assiniboine River Valley. These days the temperatures really started to climb, pushing above 40 degrees. The few hills that I did manage to find and climb provided expansive views of the surrounding farms and fields. Riding amongst large concentrations of wind turbines, I arrived in the small town of Miami. Here I took a well-needed rest as the temperatures reached the highest of the trip, 47 degrees. There were many beautiful trails through the river valleys here, but many of them were steep enough to necessitate pushing the bike. Some very beautiful parks could be found here though, and the shade was a welcome respite from the heat. You never know what you're going to find on a random rural road. These dirt roads were very peaceful, but they definitely wouldn't have been as nice if it had rained recently. In the town of Altona, a giant easel containing a painting of Van Gogh's sunflowers stands 23 meters tall, representing Altona's place as Canada's sunflower capital. This night, a massive storm moved in. In In the early hours of the morning, lightning flashes were constantly illuminating the sky. At 5 a.m., a tornado watch came on my phone, stating the storm may be producing a tornado and it was headed right this way. I was dressed and ready to sprint with the bike to the shelter on the other side of the city park. But thankfully, a tornado never did form. And in the aftermath of the storm, I was left watching these fascinating fights between house sparrows, as they sparred intensely for mating rights. Later that day, as the storm clouds cleared away, I watched a magnificent sunset over a picturesque field of canola. Because of all the rain in the previous few days, I opted to avoid the trail here, and just head north on Highway 75. It was a surprisingly good ride, with very little traffic and a big wide shoulder. Parallel to the highway, the Red River flowed in a slow meandering course. On the outskirts of Winnipeg, I arrived at a marvel of flood mitigation engineering, the Red River Floodway. Nice bike paths led me through the city and into downtown Winnipeg. The junction of the Red and Assiniboine rivers has been a meeting and trading place for many generations of Indigenous people, and now for colonial settlers as well. Wanting to keep making distance on the good bike paths, I carried on up the Red River Floodway path. This 47-kilometer-long floodway was built in the 1960s to divert waters away from downtown during the Red River freshet. As of now, it's estimated to have prevented over $40 billion of damage. After a night spent camping in Birds Hill Provincial Park, I immensely enjoyed a morning spent riding the fantastic loop trails around the park. From there, it was back briefly onto the wonderful Floodway Trail. And continuing to follow beside the course of the Red River, I began to see more wildlife that made this waterway their home. I stopped briefly off at Lower Fort Garry, an old Hudson's Bay trading post, and the location of the signing of Treaty 1. On the route up to Lake Winnipeg, the trail at first was extremely sandy, while the road had no consistent shoulder. Eventually, though, I found good gravel to ride into the night. Thousands of fish flies fluttered in the dusk, coating my body and bicycle. A little unnerving, but totally harmless. Finally reaching Lake Winnipeg, I found the road out to my desired beach camp was flooded with up to 30 centimeters of water. I pushed through for half a kilometer, determined to make it to a beautiful camp spot. and just as I made it back to dry land, a spectacular aurora show began to dance in the sky. I'd wanted to cycle under the lights for a long time, but decided this night to settle in and stay watching them, alone and at total peace for the spectacle. Huge amounts of snowmelt in the spring had made its way down the rivers and into the large lakes. Lake Winnipeg, the surface of which usually sits at about 712 feet above sea level, with a maximum height of 715 feet, was now far surpassed that, with an all-time record of 717.5 feet. This meant a huge difference in the shoreline ecosystems and a dramatic impact to people who live adjacent to the lake. I carried on north through the pleasant communities of Grand Beach and Victoria Beach, and to the peaceful northern tip of the peninsula at Sandy Bay Beach. Riding east now on Highway 11 here may look like a peaceful ride, but between Fort Alexander and Powerview Pine Falls, I had close to 100 dogs in total try to attack me. Maybe not the most advisable route. Crossing to the east side of the Winnipeg River at the Pine Falls Dam, extreme amounts of water could still be seen flowing down into Lake Winnipeg, a necessary release, however, from further flooded areas upstream. And finally, a night that I had been dreaming about for a long, long time came true.
Look at this! Yes! It's happening! Woohoo!
I continued on the TCT here, headed for the supposed Coca-Cola Falls Trail en route to connect back to the other side of the river.
So many mosquitoes, I can't do this right now. Look at this. Being absolutely swarmed by mosquitoes now. There must be 1,000 on me. I'm being constantly bitten. It's absolutely terrible in the trail here. I just want to get out of here. It's bad.
The trail was far worse than anticipated, just one big boggy mud puddle, while pushing the bike over fallen trees. But hey, at least the name of the falls was accurate.
mosquitoes are so bad. I can't even exist out here. I feel like I'm gonna die from blood loss to these mosquitoes, these deer flies, and these horse flies. This is one of the worst trails I've ever been on. The Coca-Cola Falls. Been pushing through swamp, dealing with bugs like you wouldn't believe. Don't ever come here.
Apologies for all the swearing. This was quite painful at the time, but of course a humorous journey to look back on now. At the Great Falls Dam, I crossed back over to the west side of the Winnipeg River, and proceeded to find myself locked inside. This is a little ridiculous. It's supposed to be part of the TCT. Fortunately, I was just able to portage around the fence. The Pinawa Dam here was an old hydroelectric station that, after being decommissioned, was blown up by the Canadian Armed Forces for training purposes. The remains are still a popular place to visit and swim. With beautiful evening light and a magnificent rainbow in the sky, it was now truly eastbound into the Canadian Shield.
I just entered Whiteshell Provincial Park. A beautiful, beautiful sunset. This is gorgeous, gorgeous scenery.
I'm not too sure what insects these were, but it was amazing to watch dense clouds of millions of them floating above the road. At Nudamik Lake, a great trail network can be accessed, including the marvelous Whiteshell River Suspension Bridge. The bike route carried over some spectacular granite rollers, but was unfortunately blocked further by the flooding. Bannock Point, a sacred site to the indigenous Ojibwe people, contains petroforms, boulder mosaics that have existed here for over 1,000 years. In addition to the sacred healing circle, these petroforms include the turtle, the snake, and the fish. A final afternoon of riding brought me to West Hawk Lake, an ancient meteor crater near the Manitoba-Ontario border. With a last magnificent Manitoba night sky to top off the journey in this beautiful province.